Hello and welcome to Global Review. I am Sachin Chaturvedi. We bring to you every week analysis of what has happened. And we have come to an end of this very hectic week. Prime Minister was in Africa, he was in Rwanda, Uganda, and of course the BRICS summit. There are many more issues right in our neighborhood. Pakistan went through the election. We would be discussing all this, but let's have first look at the headlines. Singapore Mercosur FTA talks have begun. China's debt threat deepens. Saudis suspend Red Sea oil shipment after Yemenis army attacks. Britain increases control over foreign takeovers. Hundreds missing in flash floods after Laos dam collapses. US pledges $12 billion of aid for its farmers. Morality of designer babies questioned, more issues on genome editing. In this week, we have today thought of covering some of the key developments right in our neighborhood. Pakistan has gone through election, and that's the focus of across the globe. Extremely important elections in our neighborhood. It is extremely important not only from the point of view of democracy in the sub-region, but it is also important in terms of how people are finding their aspirations being addressed in this part of the world. Let's have a look at this report.
On 25th July, Pakistan held general elections to elect its 15th National Assembly and 4 provincial assemblies of Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Imran Khan led Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, that is PTI, seized 115 seats in the National Assembly, followed by Shehbaz Sharif's Pakistan Muslim League N with 64 seats and Bilawal Zardari's Pakistan People's Party took 43 seats. To form the government, the PTI needs 172 seats and hence will have to go for a coalition. In the provinces, PTI and PML-N dominated Punjab. PPP will be forming the government in Sindhi and PTI in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Balochistan remains fragmented with Mutahida Majlis-e-Amal and Balochistan Awami Party forming the government. First time in Pakistan's history, 2 elected civilian government, PML-N and its predecessor PPP have completed their terms in succession. Imran Khan's electoral base in the age group of below 35 highlights the changing demographics of elections. However, turnout rate of 52% was 2% lower than 2013. Pakistan's political stability lies in the control of the Punjab province, where PTI and PML-N are vying for government. PML-N retained popularity in Punjab despite Nawaz Sharif's court verdict. Fundamentalist party did not fare well as Allahu Akbar Tehreek backed by Hafiz Saeed failed to win a single seat. The European Union's election observation mission to Pakistan noted that the elections lacked equality amongst candidates for campaigning. Rigging allegations emerged as 5 empty ballot boxes and election papers were found near Karachi and Sialkot. Opposition parties have asserted a strong influence of the army in the counting of votes. PTI has agreed to assist with transparency-related investigations. Imran Khan has made statements to improve relations with India. Prime Minister Modi expressed hope that democracy will deepen in Pakistan and reiterated his peace of vision and development in the neighborhood. In relations with China, Pakistan needs to ensure that $62 billion Chinese investments for China-Pakistan Economic Corridor go as planned. It should be noted that Pakistan's foreign debt stands $92 billion. Simultaneously, US building pressure on Pakistan to address the Afghan Taliban issue.
So as MPs settle down to have their government in place, what direction Pakistan would go in? The jury is still out. How the elections were conducted, who sponsored specific candidates, how the vote banks were influenced. And to discuss these issues, we have an eminent panel with us. We have Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia from Gateway House, and we are also joined in by Professor Sreeram Chaulia. Let me begin with you, Professor Sreeram Chaulia. The debate in Indian media and of course in the global media is up there in terms of army's influence on the election, participation of people, and of course Imran Khan's appeal in terms of a change. The fact that immediately after getting elected, he came up with the idea that he would like to have new relationship with India. Prime Minister Modi has also positively responded to this. How you view these developments in the sub-region?
Sachin, I think if you take a structural view, the civil-military balance is the crux as far as we are concerned in India. And unfortunately, that balance has worsened as a result of this last election. It is quite clear that there was the establishment, as the liberal Pakistanis call it, manipulated most of the processes to enable Imran Khan to win. So for us, really, it's a question of it doesn't really matter. He calls it a Naya Pakistan, but we are actually seeing the strengthening of the old Pakistan, which was based on military supremacy, and which then translates into hostility towards India over Kashmir and all these hot issues. So while he has expressed optimistic
but Sreeram, we have not heard too many complaints when the voting was really on. In fact, I was following a couple of channels Pakistan, and I did not come across much of criticism in terms of polling per se. So, so transparency in terms of, or accountability in terms of voting, did you hear anything on that?
Well, there have been many allegations because the military personnel were spread out and had magisterial powers and all these things. But I think much of the weeding, as they call it, was done before the election, with major candidates, Nawaz Sharif imprisoned in what looked like a very, very orchestrated process. And I think it was like a winnowing of the field to make it easier for Imran Khan. And a lot of, religious parties, they normally say they don't get more than 5 to 7%. But the point is, those were crucial, especially in Punjab province, for Imran Khan's party to make inroads, because they would eat into Nawaz Sharif's votes.
So, Sreeram, how is the institutional architecture, the election commission, or as you might have also heard, even third party were also appointed in terms of viewing the specific regions and specific voting patterns. Were they effective at all?
See, I think election commission, judiciary, most of these at the higher level do answer to the military structures there. And that is really the disappointment as far as India goes, because we have very robust and independent bodies, and which keep a check. So now the question is, it went exactly as per script. Even before the election, they were saying the army wants a coalition. The army doesn't want Imran Khan to win an outright majority. And they got it as per script. He is short of majority. He will depend on coalition partners. The military will, from behind the scenes, ensure that Imran doesn't cross the red lines, especially on foreign and defense policies, or touching their control over the economy, which we will discuss in the book of the week today. So I think overall it looks to me like a very bleak picture. But whenever there is a new phase, we have hope in India. We had extended our hand to Benazir Bhutto, to Asif Zardari, to Nawaz Sharif. Whenever there are civilians, we would hope that their hand would be strengthened. But relatively speaking, I'm not that optimistic, because Imran is coming in as the weakest of them all in terms of the coalition logic and in terms of its dependence on the religious parties and on the military.
Yeah, and Mr. Bhatia, the Pakistan election, as Sreeram has described, has gone through some a review by several people. And as I was asking him in terms of its imperatives for India-Pakistan relations, but how you see elections in Pakistan in the larger South Asian context, or in the larger geopolitics context, how you view that?
I think South Asia is definitely in a difficult phase now. So looking at India's neighborhood, It's a new phase because clearly some of the major powers have become extremely active. China, for example, is now virtually taking very intensive interest in the region, and then as a result of the complex relationships within the region, SAARC has been in a limbo now for quite some time. Happily, BIMSTEC is now coming up because the summit is due to take place at the end of this month in Kathmandu. Yeah. So, looking at the equations within South Asia, one can say that I think all governments will make fresh endeavors in order to start a new chapter with the new Pakistan or the new leadership in Pakistan. There would be changes, and I think we will have to watch how it really unfolds.
Before I take a break, Sreeram, just let me quickly ask you how you see this new dispensation in Pakistan vis-a-vis China. What kind of connect you see?
I think Imran Khan had initially questioned the CPEC. Because it was almost like a sellout of Pakistani sovereignty to Chinese debt. And he had said that we need to revise it. But since winning the election, he is increasingly saying China is our development model and we must follow how they became prosperous and lifted people out of poverty. It's quite naive because they don't have, in the Chinese system, it's a completely different system. There's no military hand in the polity, and it's a party-dominated authoritarian system. So, but I think he is likely to play that card to try and extract leverage vis-a-vis India, which other Pakistani leaders have done in the past. And now with the American pressure on Pakistan vis-a-vis the support for extremist groups, he will increasingly lean towards the Chinese even more to say that, look, Trump can't harm me because I've got the Chinese on my side. So that is going to increase, and we'll have to think about how that, in terms of geopolitical pressure, what that means for India.
Exactly. We would have to stop here for a break. Don't go away. We would discuss many more very interesting things. Welcome back. In this section, we bring to you items of discussion that are above the headlines, which are not there in the newspapers anymore. We try to bring in the factors which are influencing not only the events which have happened, but that contributed in terms of shaping them. We call this Beyond the News. In this section today, we are taking up Prime Minister's visit to Africa. As we said, he visited Rwanda, Uganda, and was also at the BRICS summit. Let's have a look at this report.
The 10th BRICS Summit was held in Johannesburg on 25th to 27th July, focusing on promoting a fair international political and economic order, adhering to international law and democracy in light of Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. Trump's administration threatening the rule-based global order was discussed along the new development bank's regional offices opening in Brazil and South Africa. The Johannesburg Declaration was adopted and forms the bedrock for a fourth industrial revolution. A BRICS partnership on the new industrial revolution focusing on digitization, industrialization, innovation, inclusive growth and investment was launched. Plans to set up a BRICS energy cooperation platform, establishment of a BRICS agricultural research platform, intra-BRICS collaboration towards agriculture information exchange and implementation of the agenda for BRICS cooperation on population matters 2015 to 2020 are in the pipeline. Terrorism, peace and security matters related to Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, Israel, Palestine, Syria and prevent an arms race in outer space were discussed. Prime Minister Modi, in his speech, asserted for globalization, open markets, multipolarity and a rule-based international system. He stressed upon human and skill development, complemented by increased knowledge sharing amongst BRICS. During bilateral meetings, Prime Minister focused on enhancing cooperation in trade and energy with Angola and agriculture, pharmaceuticals and investments with Argentina. Prime Minister Modi also visited Rwanda and Uganda and extended lines of credit and loans of approximately $200 million to both countries. In Rwanda, a total of 8 agreements were signed in defense, agriculture and dairy production, trade and leather and allied sectors. India gifted 200 cows in support of Rwandan President Kagame's flagship program Girinka. Addressing the Ugandan parliament, Prime Minister Modi ensured India's continued support in the field of agriculture, healthcare, infrastructure, training and capacity building, education and energy. Prime Minister Modi outlined 10 guiding principles highlighting Africa as a priority region for India. Development cooperation with a focus on local participation, trade with India, knowledge sharing for digitization and agriculture development in Africa was stressed upon. Openness of markets and oceans, mutual efforts to fight terrorism and climate change, and India's support to help Africa meet its global aspirations are key principles. A common colonial past was underscored with a hope for a just representative global order.
As we saw in this report, Prime Minister's emphasis in terms of bringing back multilateralism, centrality of rule-based system in BRICS summit, and his emphasis while delivering his address at the Ugandan parliament talking about the 10 principles India is committed for while dealing with Africa. We have here Ambassador Bhatia, who has been our envoy in the African region, has dealt with several key policy decisions when it comes to Africa. So, Ambassador Bhatia, let me first ask you your take on the BRICS summit.
BRICS is a very important multilateral organization. I think India accords a very high degree of importance, but I think we need to be quite careful in presenting an honest assessment. I think we have to find a space between the skeptics and those who sometimes think that BRICS has reached the perfection. The fact of the matter is that BRICS has come to this point after considerable struggle. It has a number of important achievements to its credit. It is not only the new development bank, but as we heard, a number of instruments in the field of financial cooperation
and establishing the regional centers.
Indeed, energy and sustainable development commitment. But I think to my mind what is very important is that 3 major Asian powers, or 2 Asian and 1 Euro-Asian power, and 2 powers from South Africa and Brazil, therefore from 4 continents, have now developed the habits of working together. I think this is very significant.
Yeah.
If you contrast this, for example, with G7 today, where things are in a bad shape.
In a very bad shape.
There is no coherence. In
Exactly.
fact, we can say at this stage that BRICS is in a healthier position today
than
G7 is.
That's right. But Mr. Bhatia, tell me something in terms of how the net outcome of the summit. I mean, perfectly fine that there was a coherent dialogue. There were lesser acrimonious scenes than the one we saw on TV screens when the G7 was being reported. Perfectly fine. But what kind of alternative that we are seeing in terms of development narrative, in terms of the way global institutions are to be managed, do you see a point of convergence now or even in near future in terms of how China, Russia and the IPSA grouping, if I may use the phrase, would be converging their perceptions in terms of management of global institutions?
Well, I think there are 2 aspects. One is the convergence of these 5 on the larger geopolitical and geoeconomic issues. I think it is very clear that this commitment to multilateralism and opposition to protectionism, this whole emphasis on rules based trading, focus and attention to WTO, these are all being done in the context of what is happening in the world today. I think this is a kind of a pushback to what you see in the US and in the US-EU relations and in the actions of what the US has been doing in East Asia. So, in a way it is not anti-Western, but it is a non-Western approach that we are seeing emerging very clearly. With regard to the second aspect, that is the larger BRICS 5 and the smaller 3 IPSA, an institution which I followed very closely over the years. I think it is very clear that these 3 countries, India, Brazil and South Africa are content to let IPSA grow for the time being at the sub-summit level.
Absolutely right. Let me now turn to Sreeram. Sreeram, for the first time after India launched this systematic exercise of engaging with Africa under the IAFS, India-Africa Forum Summit, Prime Minister of India has come up with this structured 10-point agenda in terms of our engagement. How significant is that, and what are the imperatives?
No, it's very important. The one he gave in Uganda, 10 principles, I think people have been asking in the African continent for a long time that you say that you're different from China and you say that you are not interested in mineral exploitation, then what are you here for? Why are you doing capacity building? What do you get from it? So I think these 10 principles have outlined to a great extent what is our intent, what are our interests, why are we doing this, and how are we doing this. There, I think clearly we have distinguished ourselves from China. But at the same time, I think, and especially the principle about consultation, about wanting African-owned processes to go forward, where we are simply a catalyst from behind. These are important elements to distinguish that India has a philosophy, a guiding philosophy behind its overseas assistance. And I think the industrial revolution part is important, because Prime Minister mentioned that we want more Indian investment in Africa. Our outward investment, as you know, has not gone that much to developing countries, and it's high time that we do that alongside our diaspora. If we can channel those, especially in the Eastern and Southern African region, if we can bring in more Indian investment, like the Mittals are a big success story already there, but we need more such.
We are running out of time. We need to take Book of the Week. And today we have thought of bringing to you this book by Aisha Siddique, which talks about how military in Pakistan has linked itself with the business and economic interests. The very impressive part of this book is this term that she has evolved in terms of calling it as mil-bis, so military business. And mil-bis is a phrase that she has used in this book to describe how commercial interests have become an intrinsic part of the establishment in Pakistan. The army has developed interest, and there are detailed case studies in terms of establishing Fauji Foundation and Army Welfare Trust to begin with, and these two foundations have become some of the biggest business conglomerates in Pakistan. They have interest in pharmaceuticals, they have interest in business and construction program, and of course in fertilizers. So Professor Sreeram Chaulia, what's your way of looking at this outcome of this book?
Sachin, Aisha Siddique is a landmark work, because what she's saying is there is a political economy behind dictatorship. And the reason they do not relinquish power, either directly or indirectly, is because of these stakes. You see, if 70 to 80% of most of the land, the agriculture, the industry, banking, finance, everything is controlled behind the scenes by generals.
What are the civilians doing, Sreeram?
That's the real question. There was one moment when General Musharraf was overthrown, 2008, 2009, when it looked like the balance would be upset with a surge from below, but they have again, tamped down on it.
Yeah.
So what she's saying is essentially, it's a bit like Egypt. The military never relinquishes, and it's very hard to overturn the imbalance.
Exactly.
And we need to read
Any closing comment from you, Mr. Bhatia?
This is not the monopoly of only our neighbor in the West. If we look at our neighbor in the East, Myanmar, where I served, once upon a time, this was also a very known story and scene, but there are differences, and I think we would have a chance to talk about them later.
So on that positive note, we come to an end of this show. Please keep on giving your reactions, ideas. Till then, thanks and goodbye.